So many cars, yet so few plugs. Welcome to the Urban EV podcast, where we speak to industry leaders and EV owners with boots on the ground to read the tea leaves on the direction of the e mobility revolution. I'm your host, Rob Hoffman. Today, we're tackling one of the more pressing issues challenging the EV supply transition. How do we scale charging without breaking the grid or the bank? To help us unpack this, I'm joined by Marina Hod, Managing Director Americas at Wevo Energy. Marina is a thought leader at the intersection of policy, technology, and business. She's worked across everything from demand response and smart grids to renewable energy and electric vehicles, giving her a unique perspective on how energy systems and EV adoption come together. At Wevo, she's helping charge point operators, building owners, and service providers maximize their existing infrastructure with smart load management and AI driven software. And hopefully that means you can share with us the roadmap to budget-friendly charger installs. Marina, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rob. Thanks so much for having me.
So, Marina, why don't we just start with a brief intro? Tell us more about yourself and what led you to Wevo.
Yeah, absolutely. I've really spent my career working in the energy space. Started out, over 20 years ago, working in finance in the power sector, buying and selling power plants and power companies. And then from there, moved into what was then really the forefront of interesting things with smart grid, right? Demand response, how to get buildings, commercial, industrial buildings, supporting the grid, participating in wholesale markets, in really markets that were originally designed for power plants. Right. And so that's really where I've spent most of my career, working in virtual power plants, grid services, demand response, which is effectively how to get flexibility from different loads within the built environment, as well as distributed energy resources to take an active part in grid stability through capacity markets, ancillary services, also demand management programs where you can actually realize savings by curtailing energy use during specific times of the day or the month or the year. So that's really where I had spent most of my career before I got into EV charging. My path in EV charging really started when I joined Wevo Energy, and Wevo is a very special place because a bunch of us on the management team and the R&D team have worked together previously before Wevo was founded. So we are energy market veterans. My background in virtual power plants and the founders and other members of the team that came from an IoT energy management background really gives us a unique perspective in how to manage electric vehicle charging most effectively and efficiently.
Well, it sounds like you and the team have some serious credibility. Why don't we just open the aperture a little bit and let's talk about the big picture right now? Talk to us about the current challenges facing the grid and charging infrastructure as EV adoption continues to rise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the grid really wasn't built for the wave of EV charging that we're starting to see, certainly in markets with wider adoption like California, but you see basically every state or place where there's generally high level of distributed energy resource adoption that's, on the heels of that's going to be facing the same issues if they're not already. So between regulatory tailwinds that, over the last few years have really encouraged EV adoption with right to charge laws that require a certain portion of your, parking garage to be ready for electrification, and certainly the consumer demand for buying more and more electric vehicles. The grid really needs to be set up to cope with all of that demand that's coming. There are different ways to prepare for that. We've seen different approaches. Certainly, some of the more forward-thinking utilities have put programs in place to incentivize charging to take place during times when there's more capacity available on the grid. But I think to really get down to it, you have to understand the sort of bulk power system, so really big scale grid versus grid that's maybe with a lowercase g, right? Your distribution grid, your local grid and local constraints.
Those tailwinds have now turned into headwinds right now, right? So when we're looking at the whole overall picture of policy, technology, and business, what's working and what's lagging at this very moment?
So I think general adoption has been working, right? A lot more people are familiar with electric vehicles. A lot more people are considering electric vehicles as their next car purchase or lease. I think we also have, generally speaking, and certainly in places like New York, people are a lot more aware of grid stability, environmental impact, and a lot more considerate about how their own energy use is going to impact the grid. I think there's also been some really great incentives and policy to encourage people to charge their vehicles during off-peak times. You've also had players that have come up over the last few years who have really positioned themselves as turnkey service providers, which means that particularly if we're thinking about apartment buildings or commercial charging, they're not just installing the chargers and walking away. They're actually staying in post-commissioning to help site hosts manage their EV charging most efficiently so that they can really minimize the costs from that, ensure uptime, and really have the kind of service that will delight their residents and drivers.
So, we're going to get into what Wevo's solution is, but AI is playing a role all across the board right now, right? It's the hot topic, but at the same time, it's very applicable to what you're doing right now. So, talk to us a little more about the role of AI in data science and optimizing energy use.
Yeah, 100%. So there's for sure a role that AI will play in EV charging in the same way that you can see it in other sectors, right? So some of the easiest areas where you can see that are things like troubleshooting and operations and maintenance, where, you can use AI to predict patterns, draw conclusions from those patterns, pinpoint problems, perhaps even before those problems arise, right? Given the data of tens of thousands of charging sessions that an AI can analyze. I can speak to Wevo, where we're using AI in a novel capacity, actually. We have a fantastic superhuman AI agent named Olivia who provides driver support on behalf of our partners, right? So when a driver who's already set up in the system, when they call Olivia and they're having an issue with charging, whatever that issue may be, Olivia, right off the bat, based on their phone number, will address them by name. She already knows who the driver is. She knows what charger they're assigned to. And she can, before they even articulate the problem they're having, she knows if there's an issue on the charger, if there's a fault with the charger, if there's a communication issue, if their credit card is blocked because they haven't paid their bill, and she can solve their problems super quickly. So that's something that's live today, delighting drivers that are using chargers on the Wevo system.
All right. Well, on this note right now, let's just talk about Wevo Energy. What does the company do and who does it serve? Are you for all about CPOs, building owners, service providers, or the end consumer?
Wevo Energy is a software company primarily, but we are really focused on EV charging more broadly. So today, Wevo Energy is the EV charging division of SolarEdge. SolarEdge is a global leader in solar inverters and smart energy technology. As a software company, we're really focused on supporting turnkey EV charging service providers. So what does that mean? Those are effectively installers who are working directly with a site host to help site hosts procure the EV charger hardware itself, manage all aspects of the installation, deal with all the incentives, and then post-commissioning help the site hosts manage all of the EV charging and provide operational and maintenance support.
It's terrific. Can you give us some real world examples, whether it's apartments, office buildings, destination charter, whatever it is, of some of your successes?
Absolutely. We actually work with all of the largest charging installers in the tri-state area in New York. Many of them have hundreds of apartment buildings where they have installed EV chargers. One such example is it's actually there's a garage in Flushing, Queens that happens to be the largest EV charging project in New York State, which has over 440 chargers.
What? Oh, tell me more. I'm really curious to hear more about this.
Yeah, so that project was installed by one of our partners, New Tech Energy, and makes use of the Con Ed Power Ready incentives to support that project. And it's very exciting to be able to have all those chargers available and accessible to the public in the heart of Queens.
Is this just a public parking garage or is it like a private condo situation?
Yeah, it's that one in particular is a public parking garage, but we have, really many sites on our system that are private parking situations, condo parking situations, deeded parking. So really, we have a solution that can support every EV charging use case depending on really what they're looking for.
Well, can you walk us just through how you help these, whether it's an apartment complex, garage, whatever it is, do they have to redo their entire electrical system to incorporate your technology? I mean, obviously for new construction, that's easy, but at a place like New York here, it's mostly you're retrofitting places that already exist. So walk us through how that actually works.
Absolutely. So our software can work with any hardware that's a standard charger that's OCPP compliant. OCPP is basically a standard protocol for how the hardware and the software talk to each other, right? So the same way that you might have a Dell laptop and you might run Microsoft on it or Windows, or you might run Linux on it, right? So we're effectively the operating system on the charger that tells the charger what to do, right? So it's telling the charger when to start charging, stop charging, speed up, slow down, processing all the payments, real-time monitoring, all of the charging sessions, all of the payment information. That's really what our system does. And the part about the when to start charging, stop charging, slow down, or speed up is really crucial for the impact on the grid, right? Because that's really where the energy management piece comes in. So if a site already has chargers installed, as long as they're OCPP compliant, you wouldn't need to rip out any hardware. You wouldn't need to make any changes to the infrastructure. You can simply repoint those chargers to run on our software.
And really, this is more for the balancing the needs of the grid to deliver the electricity. It's about saving money. What's the end goal here about using your system?
Yeah, so with our system, you're able to do a lot more than with traditional systems, or certainly if you have, so here are the options. If you have no software, then you really can't manage the charger. All you can do is plug in, plug out, and charge, which means
And I assume, just to interject real fast, on a small scale, that's more of a just, all right, this is more about saving money, right? Maybe I'll just program, although I could also just set a timer right on my EV. If it's just like a one on one situation, all right, I'm going to charge at night. But that's a totally different ball of wax when you're talking about tens or even hundreds of charges at a single location, correct?
that's absolutely right. So our entire system is set up to use the existing infrastructure in the most efficient way possible, which means getting as many vehicles charged as possible without additional investment into the electrical infrastructure at the site. So how do we do that? Well, there are a few ways that our system supports that, right? Our system can learn driver behavior so that it can prioritize those drivers that tend to leave earlier and need to have their vehicles charged first. Certainly on the cost side as well, we can effectively default charging to take place during off-peak times. However, we can also allow the drivers to override those default settings if they're willing to pay a premium for that, right? That's a setting that either the site host or the operator is able to set in our system, and that can be substantial savings. A real life example of that is the Smart Charge commercial program that Con Ed is running here in New York, which has significant incentives and benefits if you avoid charging your vehicles during the times of the grid peaks. And these times are defined in a very local way, neighborhood by neighborhood. So you really need to have sort of more advanced capabilities in order to be able to set those charging schedules in accordance to what the utility needs. Right. Another thing that we do on behalf of our partners is provide reporting to utilities, program administrators, state bodies that manage all of the EV charging incentive programs, right? Typically for those incentive programs, they're looking for very detailed and specific charging session data, transaction data, availability and uptime data in order for someone to be able to capture those EV charging incentives.
Got it. And what about V to G? So does your system also, with distributed energy, push energy back into the grid?
So V2G is definitely an interesting use case. Part of the challenge with V2G is that you really need to have all of the aspects in the value chain work together, which means that you need to have the hardware, the charger itself that can handle that. You need to have the vehicle that can support.
Yeah, not all vehicles do V to G. And by the way, for those the uninitiated, that's vehicle to grid. That means pushing electricity back into the grid.
Absolutely. So it's really not just about the software that can support it. You really need to make sure that the vehicle itself and the charger and the software can work together to make that happen.
And if it does, if you have all the hardware in place, does your software manage that as well?
It's certainly possible. We haven't seen wide adoption of that yet in North America, but definitely looking forward to when that becomes, you know,
Yeah, a reality. It's one of these amazing things in theory, and I do believe it's the future. But I also understand here that many cars don't handle that. Many people aren't aware of it, so it's not the first thing that people are thinking right now. So I assume that means your customers aren't really asking for it that much.
There's so much low-hanging fruit of incentives and financial benefit that you can capture from smart energy management that pushing power back into the grid is, you're right, still not the thing that a lot of people are asking for. Not to mention that it really, the way that I would describe it is that it's akin to where solar was maybe 20 years ago, where the pathways on the utility side really haven't been fully paved yet. So while it's not impossible, it's still not something that we see as widely adopted with very clear paths for this is how you enable and this is how you make it happen. These are the steps and the procedures for how to get it done.
All right. Well, while we're on the subject here, let's just take a look into your crystal ball right now. Why don't you talk to us from your perspective about what the next 5 to 10 years of EV charging may look like?
Wow. Five to 10 years. That's
You know, we like to be bold over here, and I'm going to play this back to you in another 5 years so we can make sure you hit the nail on the head.
Okay, that's an interesting one. So certainly with the where AI is, we've talked about it a little bit, but the expectation is that many of the things that we have to think about today are going to be things that just seamlessly are taken care of by AI, right? So a lot of things that have to do with, okay, something's not working and you're trying to figure out why it's not working. These are things that are, will not be a thing 5 to 10 years from now. A lot of what we're seeing already, this will be sort of my vantage point, not necessarily speaking on behalf of Wevo here, right? But a lot of what we're seeing in the EV charging space, maybe even before the 5 year mark, right? It should very, very much mirror what's happened in the telecom industry. And so if I start with over the next 5 years, roaming is going to play a much bigger role than it plays today, right? So in other words, if you have an EV charging app, you're not going to need 20 other apps because actually there will be a lot more communication between the different networks. And you as a driver will be widely recognized no matter which charger you plug in, which network it's on, what hardware it is. It'll just know that it's you. You're not going to have to authenticate. You're not going to have to fill out yet another registration and download yet another app and put in your credit card details all over again, right? It'll just be a seamless driver experience. And then with the advent of AI and where things are going, I would expect that you would have a lot more services pushed to you. You will have a lot more sort of relevant information about where the chargers are. Certainly, if we have self-driving cars, they will just take you to the appropriate charger on your way without you even having to think about where am I going to charge my vehicle, right? So that's a little bit of what I think the future holds for us here.
I'm in full agreement with where you're heading with this one, but let's turn it back right now to your experience, Wevo's experience working with your customers right now. What's the biggest myth about EV charging that you like to dispel when you're working with prospects? What are the challenges you're constantly hearing that you're like, all right, let's just set the record straight once and for all?
Yeah, I think there are a few things that we hear, pretty often. I mean, one thing that we really have very strong feelings about is the open nature and kind of standardization on things like OCPP, right? So folks who end up choosing to go with a vertically integrated walled garden EV charging solution, that's very problematic, right? They don't have to choose to work with our software, but they should definitely hardware and software that's going to be interoperable so that if ever there's a problem with the charger, they can always swap out the charger using the same software that they have running on all the other chargers. If there's ever a problem with the software, they should be able to swap that out without having to, touch the chargers that are already installed in the building. And we've seen, unfortunately, situations in over the last year or so where there have been folks leaving the market, right? And a lot of people got stuck with stranded assets, right? Chargers that weren't standard, that weren't OCPP, and that had some real significant costs. So thinking about those kinds of things up front before they start with the installation, that's really important.
Are you finding that most vendors out there are all following the OCP protocol right now? Is that absolutely positively the future, the standard, or are there still players out there saying, no, my standard's better, we're sticking with this?
OCPP is the global standard, right, for how chargers talk to the software and vice versa. And I think a lot of people are out there saying that they're OCPP compliant, which is not the same as certified, right? And this is where we are fully certified in the protocol itself, in security, which is another big topic that we can delve into. But the hardware that we work with, it's not enough for us to say, oh, there's a handshake. Good job. We're done, right? We really go the extra mile to test every element of the protocol to make sure that the chargers are going to work really well on our software. And we do that because we know that by virtue of doing all of that testing up front, it's going to result in a much better driver experience, right? A lot less issues, a lot less unforeseen things happening with the charging sessions because we test all of those elements of the protocol together with the hardware providers.
Marina, can you just share with us the big picture of what distributed energy really means, whether it's solar or any other energy resources? How does that all come together?
Definitely. I think we're seeing more and more, particularly of early adopters, more forward-thinking organizations that now are putting solar on their roof, and now they're looking to put in EV chargers at their facility as well. And they're starting to think about how is this all going to work together? And so that's something that's important to consider because you really don't want to have a bunch of different assets at your site that don't talk to each other, that have nothing to do with each other. One of the things that we can do, which is really neat, and we have a bunch of sites that are using this functionality already, where we can give them the ability to say, hey, I only want vehicles to charge here when there's excess solar production at my facility, right? Or to do things like say, I want to charge a different price for the drivers, whether they're charging from the grid or if they're charging from solar that's produced at my facility, right? So this is really going kind of to the next level, giving those more sophisticated properties, more sophisticated site hosts, early adopters, even more functionality at their fingertips to make their site that much more efficient.
And so is this all about efficiency? Is this all about making a better profit off of your product? What's the strength of using distributed, energy?
Yeah, I think that there are so many reasons why people do it, right? For sure, it's an economic rationale, probably first and foremost for a lot of people, right? Given the incentives that they can claim, whether it's for solar or for EV charging, there's that. But then it's also how to make your site operate more efficiently and doing your part to support the grid.
So we typically have solar, right? That one's obvious. You've got the car itself. That's where you're plugging into. You've got the utility as well. Are there any other points that we're missing over here where distributed energy comes into play?
I think we're starting to see more and more people think about energy storage, think about microgrids, think about, standby generation. All of those pieces have a role to play, right? And there's not a one size fits all solution. It really depends on what the site needs. And, you can start from anywhere. That's the other part of this, right? You don't have to start with solar. You can start with EV charging or, wherever it is that you are on the spectrum. If you want to start with energy efficiency projects, there's so many different things that you can do. But the important thing is to have an approach where you understand how it's all going to fit together.
And just out of curiosity, when Wevo comes in, is it a bespoke product or is this a one size fits all where your technology is pretty much plug and play?
It's pretty much plug and play. However, we do have partners that like to white label our solution, which we're very happy to support. We're also very flexible in how we work with our partners, right? So if they need us to provide additional support beyond the software itself, we're happy to provide support to their drivers to help them with things like SIM cards and stickers and, other operational elements to make their EV charging business successful.
Super cool. All right. Well, Marina, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. Before we go, can you share with the listeners at home where they can find you or Wevo Energy?
Yeah, absolutely. So please visit us on our website. We're Wevo, WEVO dot energy. Tons of information about what we do, case studies of folks we work with, including turnkey providers like DVM Industries or utilities like PG&E, and would love to connect with you.
Wonderful. Marina, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay, that's it for today's episode of the Urban EV Podcast. A huge thank you to Marina Hod of Wevo Energy for her take on smart energy management and how AI is revolutionizing the way we approach EV charging and infrastructure. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, share it with a friend, and even better, leave us a comment below. The road to sustainability starts at the plug, and that's why we're here. We will see you all next week with a new episode of the Urban EV Podcast.